and I'm going to take responsibility for me because I can't take responsibility for you. And most of our suffering comes from me trying to fix you or change you.
Thank you to our sponsors of the Inside Story Hunters podcast. A big shout out to Chad Hill of Term Provider, Home of Big Lou, Tiffany Wondros, CNR Services, Michael Valletta of Quick Cuts Media. Don't forget to subscribe at youtube.com, where you can follow our weekly episodes and get an automatic link to listen to our next guest sharing a part of their incredible inside story. So subscribe or listen on any podcast channel to your Inside Story Hunters podcast. Thanks for following us. Thanks for supporting us. Well, hello, insiders. It's Lori with the story on Inside Story Hunters, who has the pleasure to be interviewing the famous Jamie George. He is not going to brag on himself the way that I'm going to help brag on him, but from TV shows that are coming to many books that you've written, you're a fellow storyteller and famous for it. And I'm so excited. In June, you're going to have your book going live. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I just want to say thanks for being here on Inside Story Hunters.
Thank you, Lori. What a pleasure to be with you.
So what motivated you to write another book? I mean, it's not that you have a lot of time being a serial entrepreneur, but to keep moving forward, what's motivating you? I always say, writing a book is like standing before a group naked and saying, go ahead, critique me. So you have to be incredibly brave to keep writing and sharing. What is it that going green, how to avoid toxic relationships and thrive in healthy ones? What's this all about?
Yeah, it's interesting. Right, this will be my sixth book, including kind of a children's book and another kind of daily meditation book I did. But none of them come easy for me. Some people, maybe for some people, writing it just flows out of them. It is painful for me. So I appreciate your metaphor. But this one, I couldn't not write it, which is kind of how I've come to most of my books. And this book in particular is different from other books. The big three, the primary books that I wrote were trade books. Your typical 40 to 50,000 words. Just good old fashioned trade book. This one is different in that I wrote it intentionally as a handbook. It's 9,000 words. It's way more punchy. And the goal is for it to be something a lady could keep in her purse or a guy keeps in his glove compartment. I mean, like literally that it's truly just this easy book I can grab and use as a tool. And it's come from my last 2.5, 3 years of coaching, as I've found that universally, we all get hung up on some of the same basic things. And there is a simple tool to help you deal with conflict resolution, and it transforms the way you interact with people, including yourself. And so after taking people through through these tools, I've got individual clients, and then I ran 3 masterminds in Nashville. And I spent a lot of time with these kind of 3 groups, and we just spent so much time in them. They'd always be like, what's that one thing again? And can you write this down for me? And I'm like, you know what? I got to write this down. So ultimately, that's what it came from. It's there to hopefully serve people and just be like a super helpful tool when they need it.
You started the tool. There's Triangle, the tool that you really are passionate about. So please elaborate on that and why that one. There's so many to choose from.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'll say a little bit about the triangles and then why it was compelling for me. So first, we kind of affectionately call them the triangles. The drama triangle was developed by Stephen Karpman in 1968, and it's a red triangle, and it represents an unhealthy way of relating. It's kind of the space for the ego. It's all about survival. So there are 3 words at each point of the triangle. If you think about the triangle being upside down, at the very bottom, sometimes I call it the abyss or hell, is victim. If you move to your top left corner, you get to rescuer. In your top right corner, you get to perpetrator. And this is a drama dance that we all live out. An example would be somebody walks into the room. Let's say, take a family scenario. Somebody walks in the room and says, "Hey, why didn't you take the garbage out?" Like just a simple question, right? Now that person, there might be energy behind it, and there could be history behind it. But let's just take that's the question. A victim would be like, "Oh my gosh, how come you're always blaming me? It's not my fault. Somebody else said they were going to do it, and I didn't get around to it." Right? A perpetrator would be like, there might be some cussing, what the heck, what do you ask? I'm not, you take the freaking garbage out. Like, don't ask me to do everything else, right? They get aggressive. And the rescuer would be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to take the garbage out, but I could take the garbage out. And probably it's actually my fault because, 3 or 4 days ago, you mentioned that it would be nice if somebody did take the garbage out. And not only will I take the garbage out, but I'll buy new trash bags and make sure I clean up around the bins." Like, so, and I'm using a little hyperbole here, but that's the drama. And we tend to dance through this circle. Most people get married, one person with a dominant victim energy and one person with a dominant rescuing energy.
Interesting.
When people find each other, even in friendships, this often happens where one person's like, I just don't know if I have what it takes and I really need help. And I've been through a whole lot and I need to lean on somebody else and I need support. And someone else is like, "Well, I'll rescue you." They got a big need to be needed. I'll be the martyr. I'll sacrifice. I'll fix it. I'll show up all the time. And it works until it doesn't. Sooner or later, the victim actually starts to get maybe healthy and starts to take some responsibility for their own lives. And then it disrupts the pattern between them and the rescuer. And the rescuer is like, "Well, don't you need me anymore? I mean, hell, and the victim's like, "Stop telling me to do everything. Stop trying, always doing everything for me. Give me space to be my own person." Or the rescuer might start to get healthy and start to go, "You know what? I don't think I'm going to come and rescue you anymore." And the victim couldn't move to perpetrator and be like, "What are you talking about? You said you would be there for me. You're not there for me," And so on and on it goes. And it's the unhealthy way of relating. So there is an opposite of this red triangle. We call it the green triangle, and it's a healthy way of relating. So if you think about the very top, it's ownership. And then down alongside, if you come down to that bottom left corner, just above where you saw rescuer on the green, you'd see boundaries, or on the red, you'd see boundaries. And on the other side, you'd see the word negotiation. This is a healthy way of relating. So we interact with other people and we take ownership. We take responsibility for our own lives. We set boundaries. There are certain things that just, sorry, that doesn't work for me. This is a no for me. No is a complete sentence. No. Rescuers have real trouble with that because they're like, "Well,"
and it's a short answer.
It is.
No.
Yeah. No. That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then negotiation is like, "Hey, I want to honor the dignity in you while I honor the dignity in me." So in that green triangle, there's this, we're going to relate to each other, but there is also an honored autonomy. I am not jumping on your side of the street to manage you, and you're not jumping on my side of the street to manage me. Down in that red triangle, we violate each other all the time by crossing over. Like I take responsibility for your behavior. I jump in and I do things you didn't even ask me to do. And I get angry. I might be aggressive. I might be passive aggressive. I might use silence to make you pay. I might use abrupt exits in a conversation to make you feel abandoned. That's when we're hung up in the perpetrator. The perpetrator is afraid of being vulnerable. Ultimately, when we go to perpetrator, it's I'm too afraid to expose myself. I either don't know what feeling I'm having, or I don't know how to have a healthy relationship with the feeling I'm having. So instead, I'm just going to beat the shit out of you. And that when you're down in a victim, it's, "Dear God, I don't want to take any responsibility for anything. It's none of it's my fault. It's everybody else's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the political system's fault. It's COVID's fault. It's my parents' fault. It's my genetic proclivity. It's my birth order. It's my spouse. It's my friend. It's the people driving on the highway. It's everybody else's fault." And the victim just doesn't want to take responsibility, because if they do, they have to be accountable. And if they have to be accountable, they have to risk being their true selves. And to be your true selves means you actually enter into some form of a creative expression. Steven Pressfield wrote a book called The War of Art. And in that book, he says there's this thing called resistance. In resistance, he says resistance isn't out to, it's not out to stop you, maim you, it's out to crush your soul. And so most of us feel at some point in our lives this resistance to actually lean into that thing we're called to do. There's this resistance to like be who I am. But if I do create, it's what you said again about being naked in front of everybody, that means I have to expose this idea, this business, this system, this plan, this piece of art, this piece of music. And that means I could be criticized.
Yes.
And
that's what we fear.
Yeah, it's what we fear, right? And so that approval gets so strong, I'd rather just stay down here as the victim rather than living up into my full potential. And then the rescuer is the codependent. They don't like when other people feel bad. If in definition of codependency, psychological term is if you're not okay, I'm not okay. So I need to come over on your side of the street and fix you and remove the tension, make sure everything's fine. Otherwise, I'm really uncomfortable. So the rescuer is pretty disconnected from their own heart as well. So they spend most of their time rescuing other people. We can survive that way. Like it's survival. So let's honor it. It keeps us alive. But we don't thrive in relationships, not in relationships with other people, and more significantly, not in relationship with ourselves.
Everything you shared, we're talking individuals, but I also know corporate executive coaching is a huge part of what you do. And the fact that coaches say an executive coach or corporate, it all goes back to human beings. I mean, and that's, you say you're in the demolition business. You're helping destroy the things that stand in the way of our personal growth. So why is it that you have to break out a segment of what you do and call it corporate executive coaching when it's really about individuals? It's always about the human being. Help decipher that for me.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. No, you're right. I do feel like part of my job is to blow up glass ceilings. We all have limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons that in my communication, I have to say, oh, I'm corporate coaching is because most people don't know what they actually need.
Mm-hmm.
So they might go, hey, our business, we need some inspiration, or we need some help with systems, or we need some help with conflict resolution, or we need some help with goal setting. The need looks up here at this surface. But I go into every corporate setting, and just about every setting, at some point along the way, I pull out those triangles, and we're pretty quickly, we're down into the human element. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just a systems issue. Hey, you got a process problem. We have to solve the problems with this process. So that can happen. But even the processes are a result of the interactions of the human beings. So to your point, right? So when I talk to people, I'm looking for a way to connect with them at their point of need. They may not know that actually the real problem here is you're deeply codependent. You're totally disconnected from yourself. So you spend all your time managing other people. They may not know that's ultimately the root issue. They may not know the real problem here is you don't take ownership. There's a failure to actually take ownership of your life. They may not know that's the issue. That most people, when they come, they want me to fix the other person. Right. Hey, I need
been in every stage of your life, right? I mean, we haven't touched on that, but being a former pastor, you're talking about being able to help people just stay with you yourself, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And to me, that is that divine connection, right? So I was in ministry for years and super grateful for my time there, but I'm 52 and I just see the world through such a broader context than specific religious streams. And so I'm grateful on the other side of it, especially spending most of my time in the marketplace and corporate space, because I think there is this universal understanding that there is something transcendent. And we all give it different words. There's a story with Carl Jung, who is pretty foundational to one stream of moral psychology in America. I mean, yeah, he comes out of Europe. So, I mean, really, you could say kind of all of Western culture. But he's pretty foundational. Lots of people will use him as a foundational understanding for psychology. But he was doing an interview out in the middle of the last century, and somebody asked him something about God, and he answered by saying, "Yeah, I think you need a connection with God." And then some other people kind of blew him up for it. How can you say God? You're a psychologist. And he said, "Well, there is a universal understanding of something that is transcendent. It's ineffable. I can't give words to this thing, but I felt this way." He's like, it just happens to be that through the centuries, people have used the word God. So I thought it wasn't a bad idea. So I like that. I do think in today's world, when you get to the spiritual place, it can be clunky and sometimes even divisive, because we have people who feel they've cornered the market on spirituality. When they actually kind of gather up their data and go, "I'm right, everybody else is wrong," that becomes a place where people tend to have division. Now, everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a belief system. To me, I honor that. But here's the thing about beliefs. A belief is just an approximation of truth. It's up here. It's neurobiology. It's a synapse firing that goes, "This is what I believe." And what's true about most people is what they believed 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, they don't believe today. A lot of times people's beliefs shift, change, and evolve. So for me, it's much more about what your dogma or doctrine is. Tell me about what you know. And this can be anybody. I don't care if you're an atheist or you come from any stream of religious thought. When I can sit with a client and go, okay, here, I heard what you believe. You just articulated this system of thought, a paradigm for living. This is your worldview. Great. I honor that. Can I ask you right here, what do you know? And ultimately,
not what you think, not what you believe, but what you know.
Tell me what you know. And ultimately, your behavior is what tells me what you actually believe.
Interesting.
You want to
elaborate on that?
Well, people go, "I believe this," but then their behavior is pretty contradictory to what they say they believe on occasion. Some people are really congruent with that. As a matter of fact, I think most stress comes when you feel incongruent, when you're like, "Well, I think I believe this, but my behavior is this," or "I think I believe this, but I feel like I know something different," right? Now there's this gap. Like, I now have to resolve that. That to me is part of the human experience. It's part of the spiritual journey. I'm looking to resolve, what is the gap here? Maybe somebody told me this was true, but it doesn't seem true to me. So for instance, I grew up with a frame of reference that God was kind of a grandfatherly type with a long white beard, past the universe, past kind of space. Whether people intentionally tried to communicate that or not, that's just the imagery I had as a child, that's who God was. He was a he. He was definitely masculine. He was this out beyond the thing. And as through all these years, and then, years of studying the Bible and then studying all kinds of other spiritual resources and other things, I just came to a place, this is for me, that I actually think understanding God is way less of a noun and way more of a verb. There's this one passage in the end of the Christian Bible. It says, "God is love." And if love is a verb, then there is this God-ing. There is this love-ing. There is this energy exchange between us. Lori, when you and I connected, I immediately felt this connection with you. Like, I love this woman's passion. I love her heart for people. I love the way that she appreciates story and how it can carry people to other places. And we had this connection, right? And so for me, that energetic connection is part of experiencing the divine. And now I see the divine in you and the divine in me. And God is somehow in me, in you. And now to be the spiritual journey is about awakening to what's already true. So some religious streams say you have to earn God's love, or there's something you have to do, some transactional exchange that will earn you a ticket to a post-death experience called heaven. My way of looking at it is, you're a child of God already. The nature of being on the planet means you're an expression of the divine. So you can awaken to that or not. So you can be closed to that, or you can be open to that. I think to the level with which you are aware of that and open to that is to the degree you will experience hell or heaven on earth. So it's much less for me a post-death thing and much more for me a present reality When I'm at the top of that green triangle in ownership, there's a heavenly experience of taking responsibility for my own life.
Isn't it kind of interesting? Even
Yeah.
the triangle, you sat it down where there's a foundation. The green triangle, there's a top, and then the 2 points really have just become a floor, which really is the foundation. So
Yeah.
isn't it interesting when we're grounded and we have a base to start from, we can build from. And then that
Love that.
reverse, no wonder we're so upside down, right?
Yes, love
Everything's
that.
fun. It's all this heaviness coming to a smaller point. What I'm hearing you just elaborate on is it's just being able to allow for you're grounded, and we can be open, right?
Yes.
The vulnerability that you were talking about. I didn't mean to interrupt your
No,
thought, but
no, that's so good. I love that. And the only other, to your point, underneath that grounded, when we're not grounded and we fall to hell. What is hell? Hell is being a victim. Now,
yes.
here's the deal. All of us have been victimized. All of us have experienced someone doing something unkind to us. One of the things in therapy that you'll say to an abuse victim is, hey, the moment you were abused, you were the victim. It mattered. And the next moment, you are not.
Interesting.
Because your identity is not as a victim. If it is, you give all the power to your perpetrator.
Yes.
So I don't want to live as a victim, because that means I've given my power to whoever hurt me that day. Instead, I want to go, hey, that hurt. I'm now going up to the green triangle to go, well, I'm not going to live in hell. I'm going to take responsibility for my life. I'm going to set some new boundaries. If there's a legal thing, I may have to go get a lawyer, or we'll have to actually take this through a legal process. If it's just somebody hurt my feelings because of the way they drove by me, I'm going to move to ownership and go, oh, you know what could I have done different while I was driving? I'm going to stay green, and I'm going to take responsibility for me, because I can't take responsibility for you. And most of our suffering comes from me trying to fix you or change you.
Yes. Yes. But when we talk about success stories that you have helped facilitate in people, the professional baseball player, the pitchers, to the major entertainers, Barry Zito, I should say names, right? There are Joel's Smallbone, a lead singer, Grammy Award winner. There are all these different walks of life. I mean, do you find a common denominator, like a professional baseball player or a pitcher? You would think, well, he's successful. He's really, really great at what he does. Does he actually have belief issues? Has he ever been a victim? Or has he resolved all of that because he's a professional now, or this award-winning singer? I mean, how do you balance that into the different industries and into the different success stories that,
I think, and I hope this is encouragement for all the insiders. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what level of success you've had. We're all the same. And we might deal with it on a different scale, but the school teacher is the same at one level, has a similar pressure to a major league baseball player, right? He's got to perform in front of those fans and for his team. A school teacher sometimes feel the pressure of, like, I somehow got to show up for these 15-year-olds today, and I got to answer to the school board, the principal, the director, the superintendent, and then there's the internal pressure of, am I living up to my own expectations or my own standards? And so at one level, some of this becomes pretty universal. I would say, if there are any themes for the people I work with who are celebrities or entertainers or professional athletes, for them, it is, it's how do the rescuer thing is a major temptation, because there is a pressure that comes with them being in the spotlight to save the day, to represent what other people have projected they are meant to be. So if there was a theme, I would say, with a lot of them, it's the challenge is for many of them to know, who am I really? And am I okay if I'm actually my true self? There might be some people that don't like that about me, and am I okay with it? Or do I lose myself in becoming the caricature that the media or my fans have created? That if there was one thing that kind of stands out, I think that is a particular tension and challenge for a lot of people who at least are in the spotlight at some level.
Mhm. When we first connected, I remember something you said to me, and it's so true and ironic that we go through all these different stages from childhood and we grow up, and most of us have a mentor, a coach, a teacher, someone of influence. It's actually, we have to have them in most areas of our life. Then we walk into adulthood, and there we are. And it's like, bye-bye, off you go, have a nice day. And so everything you just said, the entertainer, the baseball player, there's professors, you have these amazing people that you're influencing, and they're influencing you. But we show up at adulthood and we're left to the sharks. I mean, so elaborate on that, because I know that's something as a keynote speaker, you also, you put a voice to this, not to just get hired as a coach, but there is a passion of why you're doing what you're doing. We're out there, hanging out there in the waters, hoping that somebody throws us a life raft half the time.
No, it's such a great point, Lori. In our culture, in Western culture, so much is focused on the individual, right? And there's a beauty to that, because there's an autonomy, and there's, the beauty in particular, I think in America, there's this belief, and it's been true for a lot of people, that, man, if I work hard and I invest my time and my money wisely, I can really make something of myself. And there are lots of other countries and times in history where you didn't have that available to you, right? So the individual has an autonomy and opportunity unparalleled throughout a great deal of history. And that's one of the wonderful things about our society. The negative part of that is that we lose the sense of community and that communal way of being that has existed in tribes and villages for centuries, even millennia, right? And so in those other settings, there was always some group of elders. If you're a Native American, right? Like these are the elders. If you're living in a small village in Finland, it doesn't matter. If you're in Russia, if you were in Mongolia, there was some system whereby there were these older people who mentored the younger people. Interestingly enough, as far as I can tell, this is the first time in all of human history that our children actually have greater knowledge in some areas, in one area in particular, than their own parents. The children actually wield a power because they understand technology better than their parents.
So true.
Right?
It's intimidating to most people.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And when, as a parent, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, what the heck? I don't know how to do this thing. And my 14-year-old, my 15-year-old, I'm like, hey, can you fix the thing, do the thing, right? They actually, and so there's even a shift there in the autonomy of a teenager, which, teenagers the term was coined just after World War II. So the world of adolescence as we know it in America is still relatively young, all things considered. It's less than 100 years old. And it was prompted post-World War II by the autonomy of having a car, and then that group of people having their own language, what we call rock and roll, for the very first time, right? Elvis and Johnny Cash and all that. Suddenly they had their own language, they had immediate transportation, they could be autonomous on their own. And so what's interesting now, I think all these things sociologically have an effect on us. There is such a focus on the individual, and now even our children know more than us. Where's the person in my life who's older, who's lived a little bit of life, who's coaching me, guiding me, mentoring? Yeah. Some of us have a family member, a dad, a grandfather, an aunt, uncle, whatever. But the people who I have noticed, and I work with a lot of very successful people, the people who crush it at the highest level, they're almost without exception, they have some kind of a coach in their life.
Because it's lonely at the top. Yeah, you can't trust. You need a confidant. You need the safe place, the safe people, because you can't turn to the spouse typically or significant other. They're tired of hearing things. You can't go to your employees. You can't go to the board. Where do you go? Yet the responsibilities, the obligation, and the success has skyrocketed. And there you are. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm preaching.
No, you're right. No. But I appreciate you elaborating on that, because you're so right. And there's a moment where you can't see the forest for the trees. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how bright you are, it's still, you're in your own body. Mm-hmm. So what is normal to you may not be normal to anybody else around you. And a good coach is a mirror. They just keep mirroring back saying, well, what I hear you saying is, well, okay, And I spend a lot of my time as a linguist. Like my job is just to hand you words and you try them on. So I'll often say to my clients, so I think I hear you saying this. Does this word? Yeah. Does this resonate? Yeah. So what you're saying is, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So do you really believe that? No. Okay, so then why did you say, yeah, right? So that's my job, is just to keep mirroring back, is just to keep holding up I don't have the answers. Everyone has the answers inside them. My job is just to identify the obstacles. My job is just to mirror back. My job is to be a guide, hand you a tool. But the deep answers are in this deep knowing right here. For your insiders, here's one question they could ask themselves at any point, at any day, if they just wanted to ground. This is a great question. First person I ever heard say this, and she's got actually a whole kind of little formula to it, is Byron Katie. But she's got this great question, and she just says, stop and ask, is this true? Or what's true? There's something about what's true, not what's the truth, that can take me into an abstract, like I'm going to formulate my doctrine or my belief system or whatever. Just what's true. And for some reason pulls you deep into that soulful place to go, wait, what's true in this moment? And it's a way to orient yourself in reality, especially when you're overwhelmed, when you're spinning out, and you feel all this anxiety and stress. I don't know where the money's coming from. My relationship's on the rocks. I don't know if our marriage is going to make it. My kid doesn't respect me. I come back to what's true. Well, what's true is I'm already loved. I'm a child of God. I'm an expression of the divine. I actually woke up today with nothing to prove. I'm already loved. What can I do today to step into the unknown? Well, I'll take one step. That's all I got to do is I'm going to take one step today. And when we get hung up and overwhelmed, we're paralyzed. We get stuck.
Yes. And your job is to help people get unstuck. I mean, it's so powerful what you're saying. You're talking about it goes back to your triangle, the theories, are you being a victim right now? And is it true? Are you being a perpetrator? Is this true? I mean, all of the analogies are what you're talking about. And you taught me that in our first interaction, where I even turned, to myself, and I'll say, hang on, is this true? Is this, or is it just, did I just make up the moment because I'm grabbing some of the things from 15 years ago? Did I just, am I attaching it to an experience that happened within a former employee? Is it, did this really happen today in this relationship? Just bringing forward, and I didn't even realize I'm still carrying that energy. How much healing happens because you're teaching that question, is it true? And it makes you stop and just all of a sudden become enlightened to, oh my God, no, I'm just rethinking and reliving something that I've been from 20 years ago. I can't believe this is still within me.
No, exactly. In the past is usually, when we get lost in the red triangle, we usually get lost in the past in our shame, or we're stuck in the future with fear. That's usually what keeps us in the red. And shame is just self-judgment. Brene Brown has a wonderful piece on this. She's a shame researcher, and she says, guilt is when we look at our behavior and we go, ooh, I don't like this feeling, because that behavior is not reflective of who I am. I want to change that behavior. So it's good is benefit, or guilt is beneficial. Shame says, you're an idiot. You're a terrible mother. You're a terrible father. You're a jerk. You're a moron. You're stupid. Shame is name calling and goes after our identity. And again, back to our spiritual conversation, that's where I can just root into that spiritual place. No, I'm already loved. So shame, you have no place here. I know who I am. Now, I'd like to change this behavior. I would like to be different here. And so the guilt may motivate me, or inspiration may motivate me. I might be just tired of living in the same routine. I have to do something. And so I feel compelled to just find help, call somebody, get a coach, write a, listen to a podcast, read a book, whatever. And when I find people who are in overwhelm, I just say, the number one tool for overwhelm is write it down, get it out of your head. You feel overwhelmed because your mind tells you there's so much. And when I have people do this, I'm not sure I've ever had anybody write over 10 things. As a matter of fact, usually people write about maybe 5 or 6. And I go, what do you actually, these 6 things? Okay. So that's what you're overwhelmed about. Yeah. All right. So you have 6 of these. Which is the priority? Oh, they're all a priority. Okay. Well, the nature of the word priority means one will be a higher value than another. So give me that. Well, this one. Okay. I'd like you to write down 5 necessary required actions. Just write down 5 actions for that one thing that you said is a priority. Could you do that today? And that's all.
And they say, yes, I bet.
They say,
no
yes.
matter who they are.
Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that. And so, great. So take that step. Well, these steps are related. Okay, that's fine. Just take steps. Our lives, sometimes you look at somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, they had such a massive transformation. Like, what a breakthrough. And there's this wonderful moment. What you don't see is all the micro shifts that were happening before they got there. Mm-hmm. We don't, it's like compounding interest, right? I mean, what happens is it's the little decisions you're making every day, compounding, that actually shift who you are. Again, this is why people find me as a coach. Here's the difference between a coach and a therapist. A therapist takes you back into your story and helps you understand why you are the way you are, or why you have a pattern that keeps showing up. I grew up in a counselor's home. I've been through therapy. I'm super grateful for it. I've learned a lot about my story and why I am the way I am. Coaching is present future. Hey, here's where I am. I got a pretty good idea where I am today, and I want to be there. But I get stuck, and I'm in patterns, or I can't get clear on my own sense of meaning and purpose. I don't know what I want to do. And so coaching is, I'm going to put a structure in place, and I'm going to hold you accountable.
And you're an amazing accountability partner, which I assume is a huge part of your secret sauce, because this is an aggressive way to say it, but you're in someone's face, you're reflecting, you're being a mirror, right? Yeah. And you're saying, you see you because I see you, and I'm pushing it back on you.
Yeah. And they give me permission, right? Like sometimes, and the intuitive part is sometimes they need a kick in the ass, and sometimes they need a big hug. And it depends on that day, right? My job is to kind of sense where they are. And sometimes I'll say, like I had one guy, this is recent, just in the last few weeks, like he's not followed through on his agreements. So he made agreements. Keep in mind, these agreements are with himself. He's broken agreements with himself, and he's feeling dejected. And so I'm trying to, like, do you need a kick in the ass, or do you need a hug? Now, you know what I wind up doing with most people now? Now I just ask them. And he goes, you know what, and he said, my father died, and I've spent the last 4 weeks dealing with his impending death, and then his death and the funeral and all the stuff. And this is not a kick in the ass moment. It's just, I just need a hug. And by the way, guess what? I got hooked on Rescuer the whole time. Instead of me holding on to myself in the midst of my father's death, I felt the compulsion to rescue everybody, fix all the situations. And so part of the reason I'm so emotionally exhausted is I recognize I lost myself. And so literally last night, he and I sat together. He's in one of my masterminds, and we're like, okay. And he's like, I want to reboot. And so we immediately put new agreements in place, accountability pieces. There's things he had to do. And that I saw, we put those in place a few days ago, and I saw him last night. So he was like, I'm 3 days in, like I'm baby stepping, but that's it. And for all the insights,
but you knew enough to listen.
Yeah.
That the power of you as a coach is, you said present and moving forward, but you knew enough to stop in the moment and just say, wait, before we start digging in and we start talking about where you fell short or how you're dealing with this, you did a check-in. You went back to the human element and just basically said, buddy, how you doing? Are you okay? Without even having to say those words, enough for the man to be able to feel vulnerable and to be transparent and to be able to just stop and just say, what I'm hearing you say is he needed a break. He didn't need you to teach him anything. Just give me a break. No. I just went overboard in an area because of loss. So could you just slow down and don't coach me right now? Just love on me.
Which ironically is one and the same. So my coaching in that moment is a hug. That is the coaching. The coaching is just presence is a form of coaching. If you have a child and your child's hurting, maybe the best coaching moment is not to tell them, oh my gosh, how come you didn't do this? You need to fix this. I told you to study more. Why didn't you? It's just to go, hey, you're really upset about that grade, aren't you? Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I could see that I'd be really disappointed based on how much I studied as well.
That draws out so much emotion, even as you said that, for me to experience that. And I think it just goes back to how much we all just want someone sometimes to just say, it's true. It's literally true what you're feeling, Lori. It's what's happening right now is just, yeah, and I just needed someone to provide that opportunity to say, yeah, I'm really dealing with the mistake I made. I'm really dealing with this gap that I'm very well aware of. And I hear that often that you do, I'm certain, your executives, people operating on such a high level that they really needed that 15 minutes of a check-in place that just says, put it all aside. And wow, that's a lot to be dealing with right now.
We all fundamentally, it doesn't matter how you present, how confident you are, how big you are, how disconnected you are, how young, how old. At the end of the day, part of the human experience is the longing to be seen. And to just go, I see you. The other day I was sitting outside with some friends and we were talking and we just heard this loud collision. And we're like right on the corner. There were some trees between us. We couldn't quite see what happened. We walk around and sure enough, this truck had hit a small car and the car was a car full of teenagers.
Oh God.
3 teenage girls. Thank goodness everybody was safe. The young man driving the truck and he took responsibility. You know, he's like, I didn't see him. And thank the Lord, but he was safe. But we walked out and I walked out to the car and, you know, the girls, you know, the driver, she's in shock, you know, and just disoriented. You know, anyone who's been in an accident knows that awful feeling, right? And so I was like, well, hey, you know, get out of the car and, you know, grab your phone and we're going to get out of the car because it's still in the middle of the road. And, you know, kind of walked, you know, went over to the grass and called 911, police officer, talked to them, called their parents, etc. Well, the girl called her dad and I waited with him until the dad showed up. The dad showed up and he just immediately started into her. You didn't have your driver's license? How do you not have a driver's license? She's like, I always have it with me. I just forgot it this one day. I left it in my purse. Well, was it your fault? She said, it wasn't my fault. And, you know, and the other guy driving the truck was already taking responsibility. And so I was having this moment like, how do I not be a rescuer? I felt some temptation here. Can I contribute to this without being a rescuer? And I literally had to pause. I kind of had to swallow for a moment. What's my responsibility in this and what isn't? And I thought, you know, I was here so I can offer some context. I'm going to do that. And so I looked at the father and I said, because there were some questions being asked and the girl didn't have some answers. And I said, well, here's the young man right here. He's taking responsibility. Maybe you want to talk with him. I think you'll get some perspective. And I said, I'm not sure if you've been through an accident, but she's in shock right now. She needs compassion more than anything else. And
but that's huge, Jamie, to remind the dad, be a parent.
Yeah.
Be a father.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was a fine line for me to not manage him, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to offer this request and I'm going to step away. You're the dad, you're here with your daughter. And, you know, he just kind of nodded his head and I walked away and left him to it. But yeah, we all walk into these circumstances or have them, where the temptation is to fix it, is to be frustrated because it didn't go our way, is to want something from it. And if we can all slow down for a second and go, there's a really good chance this other person needs compassion.
Yes. Or even just in the last few years, learning that if you want to see someone grow and come alive, turn on their light switch, it's to get out of the way, hold back. I mean, for me, it's so hard what you're saying. It's not an easy task to pull back and allow that person to, even if it takes them a minute to process a thought. I've always been the rest of like, don't you see it? Let's do this. Here's the idea, or why, here's a solution, or what the heck? Just shush. And my famous expression of shushing my face. I'm learning more and more to shush my face, but it makes me, I want to jump in there and just segue into, I ask every guest this question, may you live to be 300 years old, Jamie George, but your legacy, your footprint, you're touching lives, you're influencing people. You're in the, God had you in that moment, I believe, to maybe kind of put the father's fire out and leave the daughter alone for a moment and be compassionate. What's your footprint? How do you want to be remembered? All of this, the way you're teaching and reflecting and helping others.
Yeah, I have 4 children. I have twin boys that are 26, both married. So I guess you could say I have 6 children now. In that, because I have 2 daughter-in-laws. Then I've got a daughter who's 22 and a daughter who's going to turn 16 here in just a short bit. And been married for 30 years. When we got married young, and had kids young, and I was expecting to maybe have 1 child. I didn't anticipate starting with 2. So, I just turned 25 and had 2 children. But there was a pastor that came and visited me while the boys were born a month early, and not unusual for twins, and they put them in the NICU, and just kind of for observation and, the little warming bun thing, and I'm in there, and a pastor came up, to pray with me or whatever, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he looked at me and he said, young man, there lies your greatest chance to change the world. And he was kind of this,
no pressure.
He was kind of this gentle, guy. He said it with great dramatic flair. But it was a beautiful moment, and it stayed with me that, I've always, I guess from that point on for 26 years, I felt like if I screw everything else up, I don't want to screw up being a dad. I want to be a great dad. If I don't get to do anything else, I hope I left the planet with 4 amazing children. And I would say, sitting here today, I have 4 amazing children. It is, I feel like it's truly been a gift. Loving them has been the joy of my life.
Well, which makes me, we need to go back for a minute to your inside story. Your father was a minister, and he also wrote a play, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So would you just take a few minutes and walk us through the journey of how you are Jamie George, of who you are today?
Yeah, I grew up in Western New York between Niagara Falls and Buffalo. My dad was a school teacher. He was really creative and kind of innovative for his time. Right around May, I think 1970-ish, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was made into a movie. It was the name was changed, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And Charlie, who is I would call the Christ archetype, is kind of the pure representation of kind of the best of all of us. When they made the film, Charlie breaks one of the rules. Well, that's incongruent with the book. That's not how Roald Dahl wrote the book. But in the book, Charlie kind of remains this kind of pure character. So Roald Dahl was actually frustrated with the movie. Well, when my dad was a school teacher, he started doing plays, and he wound up, anytime you take a book and you turn it into a screenplay or an adaptation, you don't have the benefit of reading the character's thoughts, right? That's why people are like, oh, that movie wasn't as good as the book. Well, it's always going to be a little different because you don't have the benefit in the movie of knowing what's happening in the character's head. You do in a book, but not in a film. So you have to rewrite them. So there's a narrator, or so the action sequence displays what they're feeling, or, get the tight camera shot that's showing the emotion, right? So Dad rewrote it as an adaptation, added a narrating character and some other things. And he found an agent, and the agent sent it to Roald Dahl and said, would you allow Richard George over there in the United States across the pond? Because Roald Dahl is an English author somewhere in England. And can you publish this? Roald Dahl said, well, not only will I say okay to the publishing, I'll write the foreword, because this man preserved the integrity of the text. So that was a pretty cool moment for Dad. He went on to write the sequel, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, another Roald Dahl book called James and the Giant Peach. And so he was kind of in this super creative space. The church that he was going to at the time said, hey, you're kind of such a creator, you're a great teacher, etc. Would you be willing to come on staff at the church? So my dad never went to seminary. He's educated as a teacher. So his education degrees and psychology degrees. Eventually wound up becoming a counselor. And so I kind of grew up with that frame. And and had probably anybody who grows up in any kind of religious experience, you have the blessing, the curse of whatever that is. And I would say I did as well. It was a pretty big church, and they had this, they were on TV and all this stuff. So I kind of grew up on stage. Everything was a big production and all that stuff. So I just grew up on stage acting and doing stuff, and just always involved in the church. My dad was on staff. And when I went to school, I really had this passion for history, but I went out to college and just felt like I really wanted to work with teenagers. And the school I went to said we had an education where you can study adolescent culture and be a pastor to teenagers, youth pastor. I was like, okay, I wanted to teach anyway, so this is great. I did that for 13 years in Miami and in St. Louis. Wound up coaching soccer and some other things as well, and had a ball. But I was frustrated with my religious experience. I really was into God. I was really into teenagers, but I was just relentlessly frustrated with the confines of specific religious streams and how everything always had these tight-knit boxes, and I never fit. And one time I remember somebody saying to me, your problem is you're a mystic. And they did not mean that in a kind way. But I came to realize, I think they're right. To me, a mystic is somebody who, the deeper you lean into the transcendent, the more questions you have. So I don't get to a place where the more I interact with God or the more I interact with people, the more I have it figured out. My whole life, I felt like it's the opposite. The more I interact, the less I know. God just keeps getting bigger to me. The human experience just keeps getting more and more full of flavor. So when I was around religious streams, it kept trying to shrink that into a box, from my perception, sometimes to control. It just never quite fit. So then felt like, well, maybe if we planted our own church, we could, kind of set our own culture. Moved to Nashville, and we did that. And did that for about 13 years. And we met in an old factory, which I loved because we didn't have our own building. And there was an aspect of it that was really wonderful and beautiful. And we walked with a lot of people. And because there were a lot of people like us, my wife and I, our family, lots of people with questions, it was kind of fun. Like, it was a lot of people just asking questions. But it was still in this kind of religious theme, kind of stream. And so I just had a longing to be outside of it all, where I get to poke around a little bit more in neurobiology, quantum physics, psychology, and not just be in a spiritual themed place. So that's what I've been doing now for 3 years, coaching. And it's just my happy place because I'm outside those walls.
Everything is, and all I heard in the message, a lot of it goes back to, what do you know? And the questions you've created, a constant dialogue for others and for yourself to say, what do you know? What questions do you have? What would you like to learn? What do you want to change? I mean, it's just, but the foundation was set. Your father, a writer, creative, spiritually connected, built a career, and really created a path for you to follow and take all of those chapters and be able to continue writing that dialogue. That's amazing.
True. Yeah, no, very much so. No, my mom and dad and I are still very close. I'm very connected to them, and no, I have a deep spirit of gratitude, because you're exactly right. I don't feel like in my, and this is true subjectively of my interaction with humans, walking up to someone to try and convert them to a way of thinking, or to tell them that I'm right and then convince them that I'm right, it never feels like it has any kind of long-term connection.
Right.
And so instead, to go, hey, I have an invitation to a way of thinking and feeling and seeing the world. See if you'd like to participate. Maybe we can dance together for a while in that. I might have something to learn from you, and you might have something to learn from me. That the sense of an invitational expression, as opposed to something that's like, I got to convert you. I've got to change you. I've got to fix you. You're wrong. You're bad. You need something good. Just none of that has ever resonated. So for me, I honor and accept you for where you are, wherever you are on your journey. You have something to teach me. I may have something to teach you. Maybe we can do life for a little while. Let's have an equitable exchange of goods. I was in nonprofit space for 30 years. So now as a coach, it's like, well, here's here's what the cost is. If that works, great. If you don't want it, it's okay too. Like, well, let's just or it's I'm grateful for capitalism. Like, hey, we're going to have a transaction, but it's an honorable transaction where you serve me and I serve you. Beautiful. We honor that. And I'm just having a ball.
This is how I feel about Inside Story. Everyone has their different philosophies of talking about something, about helping people unveil. I use the words unveil an inside story. That experience to be able to say, Jamie George, unveil your inside story. Not me tell you how to tell the story, not me correct you, not even influence it. It's to sit back and allow that flow of where the person all of a sudden starts to create a river through their own experiences, and they tell a story. It's just so powerful. A story is about the exchange, because if it's heard, then you said it, people want to be seen and they want to be heard. Even if they say they don't. I'm too shy, I'm an introvert. I'm like, that's a crock of crap. It's a pure way to just say, don't make me vulnerable. Don't ask me to have to put something out there. There's no such thing as an introvert. It's a person who wants to block an experience, because I want to learn from you. And I hope that you said it's an exchange. Let's do life together, even if it's 10 minutes, 40 minutes, 6 years, however, a season or a lifetime. So
no, it is
just love
the gift of the human experience is to participate in
all
life.
that you've shared today, and looking for the speaking engagements. What is it? Where are you? Where are you going? I know your book again is coming out, The Going Green: How to Avoid Toxic Relationships and Thrive in Healthy Ones. I mean,
well,
we are who we hang out with.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely. So we have 3 or 4 television shows in development. As a matter of fact, I got a meeting with the producer tonight. But the nature of the world of the entertainment world is somebody could even buy a show and put it on the shelf and never be made, right? So along with kind of developing pilots and all that stuff, I've been meeting with the team the last couple of weeks, and we've decided, let's create our own show, our own podcast. So we're gonna create our own show where we can do some of what you do, some of the gift of what you give the world, do a little bit of the same, offering people some tools and that sort of thing. And the second thing that we're going to launch by this summer, the goal is to launch this sometime in June as well, is a specific tribe around this idea of going green. That for those people who are like, you know what, I'm sick of living in the red, I'm sick of living in hell, I'm sick of being the victim, I'm tired of rescuing, I want to go green. We're talking about putting together a tribe of people that would intentionally serve one another. And so rather than there being competition, you're the cheerleader. I do these high ticket masterminds, and it's been powerful to watch the way these guys have served each other, and it's usually about 8 to 12 men, one with 8 to 12 women, and to watch them, hey, I need a resource for this. I need anybody want to invest in this? Hey, I need some wisdom about this, or I need to be accountable for this, right? Just watching these groups of people serve each other. We're like, what if we did this at a broader level and we created a tribe where you could be anywhere in the world, and we get on a coaching call once a week, we create some content. So that's coming. You were the very first person I have told about this, because it's like still on the whiteboard. So, but we're hoping to launch that sometime June 2022, probably around the same time as releasing the book. And then shortly after that, podcast to follow.
Amazing. I mean, TV, writing books, I would say introvert will never be a word that you would ever title yourself, so.
I got a little of it in me, though. You know what? One of the ways that you can define, to me, a healthy introvert is someone who gets a way to fuel themselves. And
Yes.
I do have to do that. I gotta practice self-care. Part of the reason I know a lot about this stuff is because I've failed miserably at taking care of my own heart. And so my journey has been to learn how to love myself well, put the oxygen mask on here first.
Yes.
And to stop rescuing, and
Yes.
to serve people from a place where I'm full and recognizing that I'm loved as well.
Keep serving. You are loved. And I'm grateful to call you friend, and the fact that you gave us time today on Inside Story Hunters. And Jamie George, just keep making a difference in the world. And yes, you're a great dad, and keep showing compassion, being that relational alchemist that you like to call yourself. And may we just continue to have great books and wisdom and things that you keep passing along to us. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lori. What a privilege. Great to see you.
So insiders, don't forget, subscribe, check out all the information below where you can reach out to Jamie George, learn more about his services, all the different initiatives that he's had currently available, books, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, amazing books like, I should get Love Well, Into the Kingdom, Heaven is Closer Than You Think, Poets and Saints. That has been an amazing book that's just fascinating to me, that several of our clients have taken time to read and to look into. So thanks for being here. And I'll just say, insiders, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and bye for now.